Welcome to another episode of the Fortitude Forum. My next guest has been to 3 World Series as a coach. He is the author of Leading Winning Teams. He's a keynote speaker. He is a coach. He is Trent Clark. Welcome to the show, Trent.
Man, thanks for having me. So good, Bill. It's been so long, and you and I go way back, and I'm excited to see all your success and, of course, the show. So it's awesome.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for taking some time. I know our listeners are really going to enjoy this. This is going to be fun. And I wanted to start with this thing that I read about you, a little bit about your background. At the age of 13, tell me if this is true. The age of 13, you were vision casting and really plotting out your life, what it would look like when you were 30 years old. So I'm curious, what did you learn about goal setting, looking at your vision for your life, and how has that continued on to where you are now? How do you connect those two things from such a young age to
Yeah.
all the success that you're having now?
Yeah, great. I'm glad you brought it up. It was really kind of crazy. Favorite teacher at school says, "Hey, he might have been calling it in for spring break week or something, but he's let's look at your future, what you're going to do." And I took it really seriously because we had these 5 questions we had to answer, and we took the week to do a little research in his class. It was an English class, and I had an older brother that was playing hockey at Michigan State, and I had another brother who was an all-state tailback, and then my sister was just named Miss Michigan teen. And I was like, man, I'm better than all my brothers and sisters. Of course, I'm going to play in the majors. And so it was context. I was ready to do my thing. It was my first real blush of goal setting, like what I want to do, right, in life. And asked some hard questions, but I turned it in, Bill. I turned it in, never to think about it. And a couple years after that, I got that golden ticket invite to a showcase camp run by a former major leaguer. And he was like, man, if you're the best player and named MVP, you get to sit down with the honcho, the director, the former major leaguer. And man, what happens when opportunity and preparedness meet? And I worked my tail off for the next 4 weeks, went to camp, had a great camp, got a chance to sit down with him when I was named the MVP, this showcase 8 county camp. And he asked me, what do you want to do? And I want to do what you did. I want to play in the majors. It was still, these goals are still moving along. And he just said, man, I think you can do it. And I was like, man, that's crazy. Because one of those kid moments, with all due respect, like everyone else is telling me, no, I'm not fast enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not big enough. And I'm starting to tell myself I'm not enough. And he's, man, who are these people that are telling you that? And I was like, my gym teacher, my freshman baseball coach, my mom, like all sorts of people. And of course, all these people don't have ill will, right, Bill? They just want, okay, you better have a backup plan. You know the statistics of a guy playing in the NFL like Bill Burke. It's few and far between. You got to do a lot of things right. And so I really appreciated that. But he said this next thing that I took with me the rest of my life. He said, have any of them played the major leagues? And I said, no. And he goes, I'm going to give you some advice. Like, I'd be very cautious of where you take advice of someone who hasn't done what you want to go and do. And man, I've taken that the rest of my life, right? And so that kind of set me off. And you turn in those goals, and I knew about it, but it was shaping my choices to go to college. You can't be a screw around in high school if a college coach is going to take a chance on you. So I'm walking a line there because that was one of my goals. And then fast forward 1999, man. And when I did this thing, it was so funny. When I did it when I was 12, 13 years old, it was like Prince's Party Like It's 1999 was the song. And now it's 1999, December 31st. I am literally turning 30, and the next day is Y2K, right? And I came home to visit my parents in Michigan, and my mom says, hey, this letter came for you from school. And of course, I think that's my college going, hey, you've done really well. Why don't you send us some money? And she said, no, the grade school. And my teacher sent me my assignment to my parents' house, and he wrote on the top, how'd you do? And I was like, this is
Whoa.
crazy. I told my wife, I was like, I totally remember this. This is crazy. And I opened this paper up and it says the first thing, what are you going to do after school? And I said, I'm going to play baseball at Arizona State. They never called. Bill, I played baseball and tennis at the University of Toledo. And then the second thing was, what will you be doing in your career? And I'll be playing in the major leagues. And I was coaching for the Los Angeles Angels, and we were getting prepped, getting ready for my third World Series in 2002. We were building that team. And the third thing was, where will you live? And I said, I'll be living in a golf and tennis community in Arizona, which is where I just flew in from the night before, I lived over near our spring training complex for the Angels, just outside of Tempe in Mesa, Arizona. And then the next thing is, will you be married? I said, yeah, I'm going to be married to a blonde girl that's taller than me. That wasn't that hard to find, right? Because I'm only 5'6", Bill, I'm not very tall. I did do that. And 30 years later, right? And then the last thing was, will you have a family? And I said, yeah, I'll have a little boy. And we had brought my son Noah. He's now 27. He was 1.5 coming back for his first Christmas with grandma and grandpa, a year and a half old, where he does the whole Santa Claus thing. And I thought, man, that's crazy. I never looked at those goals again, but I shaped a lot of my decisions in life moving towards it.
Man, thanks for sharing that. Number one, that there is so much to unpack in that story, and it's such a powerful story. I want to start with the guy that showed belief in you, because we so many times throughout our life hear the word no much more than we hear the word yes.
Yeah.
And so just the fact that you were able to see that somebody else communicate to you that they believed in you, maybe even more than you believed in yourself at the time, there is no doubt that that had a huge influence on you going forward. How do you feel like that kind of changed your perspective and allowed you to move forward with some more confidence towards those goals that you wrote down?
You hit it right on the head, Bill. It was game changing for me. I felt like I was a pretty confident athlete, but I was undersized. And we in Michigan, there's a lot of good athletics, right? There's a lot of good athletes coming out of Michigan, and there were so many at that time. And I was playing against a lot of them with baseball and tennis, and a lot of guys that were going to the ATP tour with Todd Martin and Mal Washington and Aaron Crickstein. And then, of course, the baseball side, we had tons of folks, right, that were really good, from John Smoltz to the one-handed pitcher from Flint, which he was fabulous playing at University of Michigan, and Matt Mieske, he played the majors for a long time. And there was just a number of guys there that were just incredible. And it gave me confidence that someone who had been to that level said I could do it. And I didn't believe him. Like, at the minute, I was like, I don't believe you. But like, he said it. So he said I had what it takes, man. So I really started taking that to heart. And I became that little engine that could, man. I started really working on positive self-talk. And when you're playing against guys that are so good like that, you got to have confidence, right? You can't melt under that pressure. And that gave me a lot of that confidence to face guys like that, for sure.
You spent over a decade in the major leagues as a coach in various roles. 3 World Series rings. I think you got at least a couple of them on right now. What
Yeah.
did that experience, what did that time teach you about resilience and about really the belief in yourself, knowing and maybe just reflecting for a second that you did have the vision and the belief in yourself, maybe to a limited extent when you were a kid at 13, but here you are in the majors, and not just in the door, but now with a lengthy career around some of the top athletes in the world?
Yeah, I think it's a confidence game, right, Bill? Like you said, in that game, and everybody's an individual, but you're playing as a team sport. Your whole career is based on you as an athlete. And you and I have talked a lot about this, and in my podcast too. And it's such an important thing to feel confident in who you are and your ability to compete against these other fabulous athletes. Because you and I both know, when you walk in a room with these people, like, it's the best of the best, right? It is hyper learning 400 level. So the two key things that I really saw at that level, and one of the things I think that I felt I really had to do, was what he did for me. I had to encourage these kids to believe in themselves. You can do this. I see it. The other coaches see it. And you wouldn't really have been selected in Major League Baseball if they didn't see that glimpse that somewhere you can fit into that. But now you have to go do the work. And in the minor leagues, there's a lot of work, right? It's not a football where you go college and you make that big jump to the NFL. In sports, you go to that minor league and you got to climb through those levels, usually to that major league level. And there's 6 levels at that space before you get to the majors. And most people don't know that there's 250 minor leaguers while you have 25-man roster at the top. So it is that top 10% and that's after the draft. It's rare air. And so the two big things is, confidence is very important, but arrogance is a challenge, right? So you have to get to that, and you're always butting up against that. Hey, I'm confident, but I'm not arrogant, because that arrogance will destroy you if you don't have some humility in that. But it's easy to get humbled every day, as you've seen with the best in the world, right? It's like, you were a great quarterback, and then you throw the ball in practice, and there's 2 guys who can throw the ball 5 miles an hour harder, and they're just more accurate, but they don't run as fast. They're not as mentally tough as you. We all got these attributes we're trying to play off, and we got to know our strengths. And so that other one is hyper learning, right? You don't learn fast at that top level of, and it's three categories where you and I have spent a lot of time in, right? Special forces, where there's hyper learning, right? Life or death on the line, the SEALs, the Rangers, MARSOC, all these guys who are just doing that frontline level work. It's just, you have to be a hyper learner. You have to make adaptability moves very quick and adjust. And then pro sports, pro athletes, and then entrepreneurs. So I spend a bunch of time around those three groups. And if you don't hyper learn, you're out. Like they'll displace you and they'll find someone who does, right? Very quickly. So those are some key elements to it, man. And it's a rough go, right? But it's extremely rewarding and an amazing experience.
Was there ever a player at that level? Because we're talking about the major leagues. This is the top level of baseball. This is as good as it gets. Was there ever a player that you noticed that had so much physical talent, but they lacked the mental toughness, and so they just never realized their full potential? And maybe they were just completely unaware that side of a person's game is just as critical as the physical part. Were you surprised by anything that you saw at that level?
Very much. Bill, we came from, this is what I did when I was coaching you. Bill, let's get you ready physically for everything's about to happen. Now, meanwhile, in the backdrop, mentally is happening too, because you're gaining confidence. Like, hey, I used to bench 240 and now I'm benching 295. And like, you see yourself in the mirror, you've gained 15 pounds of lean muscle. You're a different athlete ready to take the perils of the Big Ten and getting hit and what's required out there. So it's a big deal. And people used to ask me all the time, Bill, hey, who's the best player you ever coached? And I'm like, oh, you don't know him. And they're like, what do you mean I wouldn't know him? And I'm like, oh, you don't know him because he was the most talented athlete I've ever seen and coached him. And I didn't coach Barry Bonds, who's one of probably the most talented guys ever in the major leagues. But this guy I coached. And it was so frustrating as a coach, Bill, who couldn't put that effort, mental energy. So there's four attributes to this conditioning, right? We're always skill conditioning, right? But it takes that physical conditioning, it takes the mental conditioning, it takes the emotional conditioning, and it takes the moral conditioning. And he was mentally and morally not conditioned. And that affected his mental state. The physical, he had every tool in the world that was better than everybody else. He was a 5-tool player. And so I use the grit formula a lot, right? The grit formula is like, hey, what is the talent level on a 10 to 10? And you're like, oh, he's a 10. But his effort is a 3. So 10 times 3 equals 30. Okay, so that's your skill level. And then your skill level times effort again equals your quotient for achievement. So then I drop that 30 down times 3. He's a 90. Now we take a guy who you competed against, a guy named Tom Brady, right? And Tom's a 6 coming into the league as a talent, as an NFL quarterback, but he's a 10 effort guy. So he's a 60. And then 60 times 10, he's a 600. But what happens is because you and Tom made every rep count as athletes, after a couple years, he's a 7 talent. And then after a couple years, he's an 8 talent. And then after a couple years, he's a 9 talent. And then 9 times 10 equals 90. 90 times 10 is 900. Listen, the 900 guys are goats, man. There's just not a bunch of 900 people running out there. And so you have Michael Jordan, you have Tom Brady, you have these people that there's very few on there. So I tell anybody in a company, in an organization, rate your people in the grit formula. Talent times effort equals skill. Skill times effort again, effort counts twice, equals their level of achievement. If you have a sub 200, don't ever hire these people. You cannot have them inside your organization because they're cancerous. They're people that like either their unrivaled potential that's never lived up to, or it's worse where it's like a little potential, a little talent, a little effort, and that brings pretty bad attitudes, right? You've got to have these people and develop them up. And if you don't have effort to start with, I've seen talent and skill level change, but I've rarely seen effort change. It usually takes a seismic event, a near death experience. Hey, I did this for my mom, and now my mom's passed, and I feel like I got to honor her. And then I'm going to step up and change my effort level. I've seen effort change for a short duration, But a lot of people say that leopard doesn't change his spots. And effort's one of those things that I don't see a lot of change. I'd love, you've been in a lot of locker rooms and a lot of weight rooms and a lot of studying. What have you seen in that matter?
Oh, 100%. I was on a team with 100 people. That team changed every year. You had new guys come in, some guys leave. And I remember comparing myself. I don't even think they had stars, recruiting stars, when I was coming out. But I know I wasn't one of the most nationally recruited guys, but we had guys that came in with a big reputation. But a year later, you turn around and they're gone. And they didn't want to practice hard. They didn't know how to give great effort. Maybe their off the field conduct or maybe their leadership was lacking. So that started to teach me that, man, there's a lot that goes into actually getting on the field. Getting on the team is just step one. And to stay here, you really got to find your edge, which you alluded to earlier. So I started to look for those edges, even though I could tell that I wasn't the most physically gifted guy. So I had to figure out a different way. But you're right. There are a lot of guys that come and go, and everybody thinks it's just about physical skill and talent, but that could not be further from the truth. And you're talking about hiring the right people and bringing the right people in. So I want to ask you about leadership. You are around some really big names in the sports industry: Sparky Anderson, Tom Izzo, Nick Saban, a couple of MSU guys, and the list goes on and on. So I'm curious from you, what have you seen? Is there a common thread among those leaders, those alphas, those leaders of men that really sustains and is the glue to their success?
Yeah, I think the really top performers really understand a couple things, right? First and foremost, if you looked at all the guys that we were around who we saw a lot of success, I know you spent a lot of time with Coach Saban, like self discipline, right? That is one of those things like the top people always have self discipline.
Mm-hmm.
They always also communicate relatively well with people. It may be succinct like Coach Saban, but it's very forthright. There's not a lot of room for interpretation of what he wants. Like he was pretty good. He's going to give it to you straight and very short. It's not going to be a long-winded conversation. Those they could communicate very well with the athletes, and I think that's a big one. I think they also were communicating very clear what was possible for them and clarifying expectations for the team, for the people, and when people didn't meet that expectation, always come alongside first, but there's only so many chances we get of that come alongside, and then they give up on you. Right? And I used to tell a lot of athletes, listen, you've got to communicate. When they stop talking to you, the end is near. Right? I mean, I saw that at the pro level. Oh man, we're gonna work with this guy. And then all of a sudden, no one wants to do extra work anymore. No one, and pretty soon there's a release. And that's pretty standard, man. And so that communication, they are going to give their effort. People have got to be ready for that opportunity when it comes. And that's another probably superpower of all those folks. They really understood the strategy of that. When an opportunity comes, we have to be positioned for that. The positioning for success is probably just as much as important as the success. I remember getting a bunch of speaking engagements after we win the 2002 World Series. Oh my gosh, you're so smart. The Angels have won the World Championship and you don't have all these stars. And yeah, we did all the work in 99, 2000. That was the heavy lifting, right, Bill? Like when you go on, like you were a superstar as a freshman, but you're like going, hey, man, you know how many hours I spent in the weight room with Trent as a freshman, as a redshirt, getting my body ready, getting my mind ready, getting my heart ready, getting my emotions ready for all these ups and downs and the challenges and how to lead my teams better. And I'm studying all these things and the coaches are preparing me. And you're a totally different guy your junior, senior year. And everyone goes, oh my gosh, Bill Burke's like all Big Ten. This guy's incredible. You were doing the work 3 and 4 years ago to get to there, right? And so it's, man, this is what it takes. And it's not a short road. I always talk about the weight of the ring, right? Everyone always holds the championship ring and they go, man, the weight of that thing, how do you wear it? And I'm like, it's also a WAIT. Everybody wants that championship overnight. Championships don't come overnight. You got to do the work. You got to put it in the time, and they're earned, never given.
Yeah, they're never, I tell people all the time, they're never what the world sees. They're not when the confetti falls from the sky. It happened way
Yeah.
before that. I love
Yep.
that. I love that analogy. And you mentioned high performers. We're talking about sports, but this is very translatable to business as well. So, what people I think don't realize a lot of is even the top performers that we see in both those worlds, they struggle with self doubt as well. Even a guy like Coach Saban, I'm sure, wasn't always ironclad in all of his decisions. So, how do you, in the work that you do now, coach people on that internal narrative, even if they're performing at a relatively high level?
Yeah, that imposter syndrome is so strong, right? You and I, and we run in some pretty good circles, Bill. And you meet people we've admired a long time, and they're like, "Oh man, I don't know if I'm going to get this done. I don't know if I got what it takes." And you're like, "What are you talking about?" Like, we're all looking at you because you're the star, man. And it's wild, but I think there is that challenge. You know how I coach people in that is one, comparisons an end game that's a dumb game, right? Why would we compare ourselves? You're the best Bill Burke I've ever known. And you're incredible, man. It's awesome. And I can never be Bill Burke, right? First of all, I'm not left-handed, right? And there's all sorts of these things that you do so much better than the rest of us. And as you're the best Bill Burke and the best quarterback that Bill Burke's going to be, and you can't be somebody else, right? You can't be Roethlisberger. You can't be these other guys. They're different athletes that have different skill sets. You maximized your skill set. And it's one of the things I admire so much about you, Bill, is that you've taken your potential and you maximize it. And it's so inspiring for other athletes. You've moved the needle for so many other people who have watched you. It's amazing. And so when I talk to these leaders about this, failure is not final. We're going to try some things. It's not going to work. And you're going to go in there and go 3rd and 25. And Bill Burke doesn't like rolling out to his right because he's got to throw across his body as a left-hander. And you're like going, man, I tested some fast DBs out there and I lose a little bit on the ball and I try to throw this thing down 25 and then you give up a pick. That is instant data point feedback. Does that make Bill Burke a bad quarterback? Heck no. Like, he's got to go out. He just learned something really important. And so failure is not final. We strategize and we get an idea. And then Bill and I, we go out and we try to execute our idea. And if it doesn't work, we can go back to the board where we had 3 ideas. And maybe the second idea was the idea, but we thought at the time this was a better idea. It didn't work. So we can go back and redo it. Failure is not final. And man, the faster you fail, the faster you go. Learning what not to do is sometimes some of the best things ever. And so I think people have a bad relationship with failure. And as a baseball guy, where, hey, if you're successful 30% of the time, you're a hero. Like, you make 10 million a year now for that, right? So it's a David and Goliath story, right? Here's a pitcher, 8 of his closest friends, all trying to get you out. If you're successful 30% of the time, you're a champion. And you and I can't imagine going back to the sideline or the dugout and you threw an interception. The coach goes, "I guess you're not going to have another chance." You're like, "I'm going to have 24 more attempts today at throwing the ball, and I'm going to make 23 of them. I'm going to go out there and I learn the data point, and I'm going to be better." I just took my first at bat. You know what, coach? Randy Johnson's too good. I don't think I can go up there for the other 3 at bats today. I'm the leadoff guy. I'm going to get 3 more chances. I've got to adapt. I've got to do something different because the first one didn't go well. Failure is not final. And the really high level leaders, they've understood that for a long time. They learned that failing's not a bad thing. It's a data point and it's okay. And we move on and get past it, which is why they have so many success points in their life.
I love it. 100%. Very well said. And I tell people all the time, too, it's the ability to keep moving forward through those failures. And even when the outcome is uncertain, even if you don't know if you're good enough, even if you don't know what's going to work out, the people that can continue to do that, and there's a lot of emotion involved in that and mental
Yeah.
toughness, of course. And those are the people that you just described that ultimately have that success. You talk about winning every day. So, what does that practically look like for somebody that's listening right now? Maybe not an athlete, but maybe somebody in the business world, or maybe somebody that's an up and coming entrepreneur?
Yeah. You and I worked with a great coach named Ken Manny. And I remember Ken, I was an athlete under Ken like you, but I was at Toledo. You were at Michigan State under Ken. And he was a mentor to me. He just guided me along. And I loved his quote, "This day for that day," right? This day for that day. And I was like, man, and when I wrote those goals when I was 13 years old, I've got about 4 years till they're going to make a decision on me when I'm 17 years old. Where 4 times 365, a little over 1,400 days of this day. What am I going to do this day for 1,400 days until that day when a coach says, "Hey, Clark, I want you on my team. I'm giving you a scholarship. You can be this level of player for me." And just like Bill Burke got that out of Youngstown, Ohio, you had all those days. How am I going to win today so that in the future someone says, "Yes, I want you on my squad. I want you to come and play for me. And man, you got the ultimate, right? Nick Saban's telling you like you can play for him. And if that doesn't build you confidence, now Nick Saban wasn't the guy that we all know him to be today, right? He didn't have that same reputation, a good reputation, but he wasn't the 9-time world national champion or whatever.
Right.
But we knew he was special. We knew he was good. When he says something, and you knew he'd coach for the Cleveland Browns just up the road from where you grew up, and you knew, hey, here's an NFL guy who says he wants me to play for him. That means a lot to a young man or a young woman who sees these coaches who believe in them. And so, I always talk about in business, right? We're playing quarter games. I play 90-day games with all my clients. This is what we're going to do for 90 days. This is the current reality. This is the future reality. In 3 years, we're going to be here, but in the next 90 days, we're going to be here. And then we're going to be here. And then we're going to be here. And then we're going to be here. We're going to play over the next 3 years 12 90-day games. And we need to go 12-0, right, Bill? We need to win all these games. And so that's our season. And in 3 years, we 2x to 10x these companies because everyone every day writes down what the 3 most important things they're going to do that day. And they're responsible for getting that done. Before you go home, before you hit out your head on the pillow, make sure that you get the 3 most important things done. And then next week, every week, we're going to talk about those 15 things in your work week that you accomplished. And you're going to execute on those things for the greater good of our organization. It's your role and responsibility that those things happen. So I'm going to communicate that, and then I'm going to execute on that. We're going to simplify that process, and then we're going to prioritize what those 15 things are. Because the reality is, picking up the mail is not the highest priority item. Getting something done and getting that accomplished and getting that move towards our goals of my role and responsibility, whether that's hiring a key person, whatever that is, that's going to be those 15 things. And when everyone in the organization gets alignment on that, we start winning the days, and then we win the weeks. And then when we win the weeks, we win the months. And when we win the months, we win the quarters. So now we won our game, and we start winning game after game. Every quarter, we start winning the years. And when we win the years, we create one of the best companies out there, the top 10, top 20% of all brands out there. And what I say about the top 20% is everyone gets 5 proposals. So I call the top 20% hired because the other 4 aren't as good as you.
I think what you're alluding to is something that we've talked about on the show before, and that's the process. It's not getting attached to that ultimate goal or pie in the sky vision that we've had that's 5 years out. You're talking about the little things that everybody needs to do and focus on and not get distracted by the other things in order to accomplish that big dream. So I love that description, and I've heard it before, but you put it very succinctly and very emphatically. So I love that. Let's talk a little bit about before I let you go ahead. You have something
One
else?
thing I want to say about that, one thing I
Yeah.
want to say about it is like how we win every day is we measure what our wins look like. You and I, we would measure it, right? We would measure, okay, I'm going to get
Yeah.
in the weight room. I'm going to do a personal best on this. I gotta do this thing. I got to get this classwork done. I got to get 45 minutes in the video room and study. You knew how to win, and we measured that win because you knew if you got the 45 minutes on those days, you were ready for Saturday's game. And if you knew you got the weight room, and then so you learned that, and that moved you to Sunday's games. And so you learned how to win every day and how to build that process of what winning looked like. And we need to do that for ourselves and for our teams and for our individuals. And that's what makes up a great team, because you and I winning our day is not 1 + 1 = 2. That is, we affect a lot of people. We have a lot of influence on other people. So when Trent and Bill work every day, all of a sudden it's not 1 for 2. It's, that's all of a sudden cumulative effort. So Bill and Trent getting those wins all of a sudden raise us up like 10x. It's pretty wild.
You bring up a good point. There is much more tracking activity in the sports world than in the business world, believe it or not, from my
Oh
experience.
yeah.
You talked
Yeah.
about the weight room and Ken Manny. You knew how much you lifted the last time you walked through those doors, and you were always trying to get above that number this time. And it was on a sheet of paper, and you knew exactly what your goal was, your mini goal to get the big goal. So I love that point. Thanks for bringing that up. Your
I
book,
tell
I want to
companies,
talk.
Bill,
Yeah,
I tell a lot of companies on that. On sports, we review the tapes.
yeah.
Like we review the tapes. Like right after your game, Bill Burke goes in and he does the next day a full study on what happened in the game. What did we do right? What do we need to improve on? We get a bunch of feedback on that. I go into organizations and hey, you just did this RFP. You didn't win. How come you didn't win? I don't know, but we got 2 more this week, so we'll try our best. I'm like, what, are we going to review the tapes? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, let's call and find out why they didn't select us. What did we do better? What could we have done? What would they like from us that we didn't give them? Like, why aren't we asking the questions? And they're
Yeah.
like, I don't know. And this is back to our world of sports. We review the tapes, we have measures, we look at what we're doing right, and we know it's predictable outcome. When he's got X amount of reps in on the weekend, he knows that, hey, if I get these practice reps in, I throw for 60% in the game. And it's almost predictable, right? So we know what we can do. If our line gets this much time and you have over 3.2 seconds, you all of a sudden throw at a 10% higher rate of completion. Like, all these numbers are measured.
Yep, yep. Very good. Your book, Leading Winning Teams. You've alluded to so much of the stuff. Yes, there it is right there. Grab it on Amazon, wherever you get your books. It's a great one. Uh, Tell me, just give the listeners a little bit of an overview. What are the main principles in there? And then how did you come to assemble the overview and the principles so you can lead not just people in sports, but of course, people in business as well?
Yeah, so I have a show called Winners Find a Way, and I had all these interviews of all these one percenters, like Bill Burke, who came on the show and have done these interviews. And so when I compiled that, I started seeing trends in all the one percenters, right? This is what they talk about. So I went out and I did a TEDx talk called The Pain Exchange, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And we choose that all the time, and we choose it like hundreds of times daily. We have these decisions we got to make, and people in you're in my role, we make 40 to 60,000 decisions a day. It's wild. So it's whoa. So the pain exchange is, will I have the pain of discipline to make the right choice? Or will I have the pain of regret and I won't choose discipline and I'll put it off for tomorrow. I don't really need to do that right now. So that discipline became a big thing. So when I started seeing these trends, I built the chapters off what kind of categorically I saw among sports executives and athletes and coaches and all these different people in business that I'd interviewed. And I saw these trends, and I gathered the book in these chapters to kind of walk through someone how we could lead your winning team. How would you show up as a leader? Because now we need a bunch of other leaders and model that. And so then it's a workbook style, because at the end of every chapter, here's your pain exchange. Will you have the discipline now to execute on this skill and how you could get better in that? And so here's the pain exchange. Do this exercise and find out. Like, so it's a real walkthrough kind of workbook style. So I tell a lot of people, don't read my book, study it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I've heard that quote from my guy, Nick Saban, plenty of times. I think it's hanging on my wall somewhere in this office here. He's had a lot of quotables and certainly ones that have stuck with me my entire life. And now my kids get to hear over and over again. Make sure, before we let you go, make sure just to the listeners, go out and find Trent's book. It's a good one. And like he said, don't just read it, but study it and actually put it into action. You help people, and your mission is to really help people win every day, which is so simple, but so impactful. So if our listeners could take one thing away from that message and extrapolate that as they go through their like you mentioned, their day, their week, their month, their mini year, what would that one thing be?
I would say the one thing for them is that as you move to simplify, which is what I always encourage, understand simple is not easy. And I think that's a misnomer in the market, right, Bill? Is we think simple is easy. And I'll just go to the Bible. Hey, here's 10 commandments. It's simple. Listen, like, we're mucking that up all the time, right? Like, we're messing it up. And it's, holy cow, it's so simple. Yeah, simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. And just because you're trying to simplify it, and when it's what we want to do, just recognize, like, it's still going to be hard, and it's okay. It's okay to go through those reps, and it's okay to error. It's okay to mistake. Get back up. Like, those are just great data points you're going to learn from.
Love it, my man. So tell the listeners where else they can get the book and what else you're excited about, what you're working on right now, and how they can connect with you going forward.
Yeah. First of all, always reach out to me at trent@leadershipity.com. I am on all the socials at leadershipity, leadership ITY, or at Trent M. Clark. I help companies grow, man. This is what I do. So if you want to talk to me about growing your company, how that looks, please reach out to me. Always happy to talk with you about it. I use a system called Bloom Growth System. I've been coaching these companies out a long time, and I partnered with a guy named Todd Smart, who had a company who provide a lot of software for coaches and for business operating systems. And I thought, man, if we're going to simplify, this software has been game changing for all my clients. And so I use that software, and we do it on our investments too. Like every company we buy, we have to put the system on. And then we get continuity and we get visibility. No matter where the companies are in the world, we can open up that software and see exactly how our teams are tracking, the data we're measuring, how we're doing on that predictive measures to get our outcome that we really want. And it's been game changing for me and those around me and all of our teams.
Perfect. Best of luck to you, Trent, and keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing a great job. Love the insight, and I know the listeners are really going to benefit from it as well. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Bill.